Guys, welcome back to Let's Talk Quality. This is going to be the first episode of 2026. So I guess to give everyone context, I wanted to get my two good friends, John and Ed, on to talk about all things pharma, biotech, and quality. Both of you have been on the show before. You're both wearing pretty outlandish Hawaiian shirts. I let the side down, unfortunately. I didn't have enough time to change in between, but I wouldn't expect anything less from both of you. So thank you for making the effort. We're going to zoom out, I suppose, to start with and talk a bit about the pharma and biotech landscape where we're currently at, and then we'll zoom in on the sort of quality lens.
Good.
Does that sound okay to both of you?
Definitely.
Works for me. We've not prepared much, so hopefully this goes relatively smoothly. I'll start with you, John. How are you, generally speaking?
Good. It's sort of keeping in line with the topic. It's 2026 looks to be a challenging year for the industry. The number of layoffs and furloughs that seem to be running around are pretty rampant. So it could be a bumpy year, it looks like.
What do you reckon, Ed? Well, how are you, Ed?
I'm doing well. But again, too, kind of what John was alluding to, when you look at the Fierce Biotech report right now, I think, it's only the 20th of the month. And we've already seen 8 layoffs within the industry. My current employer as well. So it's something that we are still seeing, and we're still seeing that challenge. Capitalization, market availability, and kind of, unless you've got GLP-1 somewhere in that title of your product, it's hard to get a lot of that funding right now.
It's funny, isn't it? I mean, I set up the business in January 2023. So it'll be 3 years ago this week. And I remember one of the first people I spoke to, I can't remember who it was, said the market is about to get pretty bad, and it hasn't been great, pharma and biotech. Do you feel like, and I'll sort of give my opinion in a sec, but do you feel like we're still very much on the downturn? Can you see any sort of light at the end of this tunnel? Because it's now been a good couple of years where, the layoffs have been thick and fast. Yeah, there's been some unfortunate.
I thought we'd hit rock bottom at the end of the year, but I'm no longer convinced that's the case. It still seems to be going on.
I agree with you, John. Don't think we've quite hit that bottom point yet.
Do you know?
I am seeing in some areas, cell and gene therapy is trying to come back a little bit. Some of the more traditional therapies, I'm seeing some increase in there as well. And I think we've become a little bit more risk averse from a cap perspective, I think.
AOCs and ADCs seem to be trending up, which is one area that seems to be moving in the right direction.
Yeah. What do you feel like, you obviously mentioned GLP-1s, and are there just focus on, I suppose, areas where you think there has been a bit of an upturn or there's some positive, any particular types of companies, any modalities, therapy areas, phases of development where you think, right, there's a bit of positivity, there's demand in there?
What do you see, Ed? To me, I'm a bit deeply immersed into the AOC ADC area, and that does seem to be expanding from sort of supply and demand perspective. And that draws on mAb, siRNA, and conjugation technologies, which hits 3 sort of sub-industries within the industry, I think, which is intriguing and complex, but does seem to be a force moving forward.
Kind of stepping outside of pharma for a little bit, when you look at the more interesting modalities, med device is seeing some increase in activities and investment and things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see how med device affects life science, I think, in the short to medium term as well.
Digital health side of things as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You've both worked in the cell and gene therapy space over the years. How do you see that space? It's has had a fairly rough road over the last year or so, particularly. Do you see that?
I think the land rush is over. I think that land rush mode we were in with cell therapies is over. Now it's more of the proven track record cell therapies. I think as you see more coming to market now, it's getting its own traction. And I definitely think that as an industry, cell and gene therapy did something very smart very early on, and they created a very tight-knit community of cell and gene therapy providers that really are helping drive some of the regulatory front work, both in the US as well as the rest of the world.
Yeah. I think CAR-T's been hit particularly in the last, I'd say, 3 to 4 years. Gene editing, the editas type work has been, I think people have had a hard time capitalizing on the technology and turning it into what looked like a strongly promising area. It could be changing too. I'm not quite sure, and I don't think I have the pulse on that. But I think when you look at gene and cell therapy and you look at where biotechnology was when it started in the early protein sciences days, it took 15 to 20 years to start really seeing the results. And it may just be that we're so used to quick turnaround on capital investment and getting products to market that we've had in the last few years that we've just got to keep, plowing the fields and waiting. It may take 20 years to get to the point where those products and processes are so well understood that they can become successful.
Yeah. Well, it's scalability as well. How do they, once a company gets to commercial, how do they continue that? You've seen some, some commercial approvals companies that have got products to market almost like, you feel like you've done the hard work and then it becomes even harder in the grand scheme of things. So last year there's obviously been things that have impacted the market, like politics. We had the changes of the FDA, so the bit of the banking crisis. So there have been a few things that impacted things, and I think kind of caused a lot of uncertainty in the climate last year. Talking about the FDA, how do those leadership changes in the FDA, sort of in practice, how do you think they've played out in the biotech space over the last 12 months? Has there really been an impact, or are we, is there going to be an impact? Has it just been uncertainty?
Ed, I don't know about you, but I actually haven't seen any real impact in my life or with my projects that I'm working on at this point. But you tend to be, as a person, you're focused on what you're working on specifically. But I haven't had anything that's really slowed down, for example, IND reviews and approvals or inspections. But have you? Out of curiosity, I don't know.
The only thing I've seen that I've tangibly felt has been the agency has pretty much moved to written response only. So in the 10 years that my current company has been around, and actually the last time it was when I was at Mustang that we had a face-to-face review with the agency. And that was only because it was a pediatric cell therapy we were talking to them about. Other than that, it's been, here's your automated written response. I've seen the names on their change. I've seen some of the different areas of responsibility. I've seen people shift within that as well, but nothing that's had either a negative or positive net influence on my world.
Yeah. Do those, that lack of sort of face-to-face interaction, does that longer term play a part in potentially run the risk of relationships between quality heads or organizations and the FDA, because you're seeing them less, and I'm guessing you probably build up relationships with the regulators over the years.
You do, and there is something to be said for if we could just have a 10-minute on the phone or on Teams meeting with them, we could probably get to this question. Whereas trying to sit in a room and interpret what their response is to you, what their intent of that response was, and then writing that response back, you get into a lot of minutia because a lot of people are interpreting. You have 6 people around the table with 6 different interpretations of what that reviewer meant when they wrote that paragraph. So there's always that desire to solve things face to face. That classic, don't write me an email, come down and talk to me.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Yeah. And then from a regulatory perspective, do you think the agency is moving or leaning to, because there's been sort of various different sort of regulation and things changes, but do you think the agency is leaning towards that sort of speed of approval, or is it still sort of anchored in kind of risk aversion? Where's the balance at the moment, do you feel?
As 6 different companies, you're going to get 6 different answers, Hamish. It really comes down to, there are those who feel that they're not moving fast enough. There are those that are feeling they're moving too fast. And there are others who feel like nothing's really changed. And then the question is, where does AI fit into all this as well? So I think right now, where the agency is still seeing some staffing loss, they've not really added a lot of new folks. I know my Rolodex of active FDA personnel has shrank to, former FDA as well. I think until the agency gets their feet under them a little bit, it's going to be a bit to tell what that is.
I think also people are less averse to looking at alternative countries to do their initial studies, and are looking at countries like Australia and New Zealand because it's a little bit easier to get approval of INDs, CTMs. Even Europe, which, depending on your perspective, might be easier or harder. I see most of the companies that I work with that are US based are used to start with the assumption that they'll be doing their initial studies in the US or Canada and then moving out to rest of world. Whereas now it's almost reversed in that it seems like the regulatory environment is more, I'll say conducive might be the word, but it might not be the right word, more friendly to studies that are going to be first in human, in their country. I don't know about you, Ed, but I do most of my answers that I'm or feedback that I'm giving today is based on not on reading great articles in things like the Gold Sheet that we used to, or Fierce, for example. It's more from just a word of mouth, talking to friends, talking to Ed, talking to you, etc. And that just forms my sort of takeaway. I don't know how much, for example, I would trust any media source anymore, as opposed to just trusting people I know and talk to. I'm starting to sound like R6, so excuse my echoey voice. I'm going to talk about a brainworm any minute now.
But it's interesting because there's so much material online, the regulations, and you do. I think I did a podcast with Greg Forrest, who obviously Ed you well, and it was all about, well, who do you trust? Because you learn stuff from the people you work with, but that doesn't necessarily mean their opinion is particularly accurate or not. And people will learn stuff from other people and then take it and then teach it to another person. And there's so much information, there's so much AI available out there and stuff. So I think, in 2026, I think trust is such an integral part of the learning and development, because how you don't know what, you go on social media, you go on LinkedIn and you see a picture and it's not a real picture, or you see a post or something and you don't know who's written that. So
there really are monkeys in St. Louis running around free. Is that?
I've never been.
Have you seen that crazy news thing in the US, Hemish?
No.
About research monkeys that were videoed running around the streets of St. Louis, Missouri, I think it was. And then the police were chasing them down and they had videos of them. And then they realized most of the videos were fake. And then now they're questioning whether there were ever any monkeys actually running around.
Well, that's it. What's right, what's wrong? So, look, I guess that goes nicely into AI. You can't have a conversation at the moment without AI or digital tools coming up. And I don't know about you guys, but I find that there's a lot of waffle out there. I find there's a lot of stuff being said that it's coming, but nobody actually sort of really specifically talks with any clarity around how companies can use it. I think we've both spoken about this, or spoken about this with both of you separately. And John, I know we spoke about it on the podcast about, the tools and stuff that you're using. I guess as a question into, we'll start with you, John, but in your view, what does sort of AI look like in biotech in 2026? Beyond all of the waffle around it, what are companies, or what can companies actually do with AI, and where is it at the moment?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. So to me, there seem to be maybe 2 or 3 immediate applications in the quality sphere. In research and development, there may be a lot of ways to utilize select drug candidates based on data. But in the quality world, I think both Ed and I are familiar with an application that is using AI to extract data from batch records and paper records and put that into an I'll say, an intelligent database that then looks at all the other corporate systems. Let's take ERP type systems as an example, or LIMS systems as an example, and it can relate the information that you might have in one system to another without a human having to do the querying, although that's still possible. But it, for example, can say, if you have a deviation, it can go in and say, all right, for this particular deviation, I can show you every lot of product that has a connection to that lot, and even what raw materials and vendors were sourced or used to make that lot, and then show you trends related to that data that will help you evaluate the impact of the deviation. To me, that's as advanced as anything I've personally utilized, and I find it to be truly remarkable as a technology. In general, I think the other thing is more on the logistics and sort of functional side of saying, Copilot, help me develop a risk assessment for this problem, and here are some of the facts, and then watch Copilot or any of the other engines generate a risk assessment. Not that it's, to me, when I've done that, the system doesn't generate anything that I don't already know, but it does present it and package up and do a lot of the grunt work of writing the initial risk assessment. And that can free you up to do other things, which is nice, such as really think through what are some of the potential impacts that the AI couldn't predict. And maybe that is something that will be coming soon. I haven't seen it. I'd love to. I know Ed's more advanced than I am on this, so he may have some better examples.
I mean, I've played a little bit with using Copilot and taking a document, taking output, and saying, dear Copilot, review these two documents against 21 CFR 211 and UDELUX Volume 4 for compliance, give me a list of where the gaps are. And it has actually produced a fairly good list. Now I've had to go back and go, this model isn't up to date because that part of 211 was retired or was superseded by this requirement. So there's still some things that we still as humans need to go back and check. But, when I was with the previous company, there was this really great tool we had in our ERP system, and I could go in and run this report, and we were making a reagent, we were making a test reagent, and I could see every material related to that test reagent. And I thought that was the best tool ever for product release. Now, did I still have to review the batch record? Yes. Did I still have to sign off on the record? Yes. Did I have to still sign safe? Yes. But that saved me half a day in lot tree analysis just by being able to run that report and see the reality of what was going on.
The other thing, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, Ed, is I have seen, now that I think about it a little more, AI has been very good at visualizing data. So you can give it some data in a tabular format or in a database and say, present this to me in a visually manner where I compare X to Y and add in this parameter or search for that. And the visualization of data, I've found AI to be amazingly good at.
Yeah. I did it recently when I was doing a risk review, and, hundreds of lines in a spreadsheet. And I said, give me a heat map. Take this, give me a heat map. And it gave me an 85 to 90% accurate heat map. Then I could really focus on where I needed to spend my time and go back and spot check other things. So it's really good with that. Another great example of the visualization, John, was my clinical supply person was trying to figure out a way to best visually represent where we had clinical trial material and how much was at what depots. They put that in there, and AI came back with a really cool little way to do it within PowerPoint to show visually, here's a map, big circle, lots of material. Little circle, not a lot of material. And then we could regionalize. It was fantastic.
I'd be interested in throwing the question back to you, Hemish, and ask you a question out of curiosity. In your space, do you see AI having any impact on the ability to find or retain good people?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think the amount of AI tools and technologies in the recruitment space that have come up over the last 2 years, well, the last 6 months even, it's every day something is coming up, and that's a problem for founders of recruitment companies and leadership teams, is that there's so much out there, and it really becomes difficult to cut through the noise and figure out what you actually need to use. And the majority of stuff you can use with ChatGPT, right? So I use ChatGPT for everyday tasks. It speeds things up. I have note takers in most meetings. This podcast is transcribed. So, when I first started the podcast, I would take a transcript and I would listen to the podcast back, and I would, write my notes and show notes. And Ed was the second podcast guest, I think. And I remember I'd listen to it back and I'd write notes. Ed was very funny at this point.
And that was just looking.
Exactly, yeah. And I would, it would just be so manual. It would take me about 3 hours to do it all. Now you take the transcript. I have an AI agent, a podcast agent, whatever you call it, on ChatGPT, who you feed it the transcript, you feed it the correct prompt, and it gives you everything. It gives you the show notes. It gives you some topics to talk about. It gives you the emails to send. It's a whole workflow of things that just speeds things up and allows you or me to focus on doing the key things that I need to do. And then from a staffing and sourcing perspective, I think it will speed things up. There's databases and CRM systems that you can use where you can find candidates, you can find talent a lot faster. Personally, I think it will allow recruiters to, become more efficient, but I don't think necessarily it will improve the quality of output. I think, what matters at the end of the day is having, I think, human to human interactions and getting to know people on a personal level, which is why I do the podcast, which is why I go and meet people in person. From London, I travel to the US, try and do that 4 times a year. Not 4 times a week, unfortunately. But I think that the recruitment companies or the recruiters that are just solely relying on AI will, probably fall behind a bit. You can use it to an extent, but you can't build communities, and you can't at this point in time just sort of spot certain signs that humans will give you in a face-to-face or virtual interaction. So I think there's a time and a place for it. It will speed things up and it will allow recruiters to focus on meeting more people in person. That's the way I see it.
One of the things that's a telling factor for me is when you look at the draft of Annex 22, which is the use of AI and GMP for EU, they make it very clear in that draft that you will maintain human in the loop. So to your point, Hamish, whether it's you're doing product release or you're doing recruiting, you still need that human in the loop. John and I are of certain generations that we remember QMS before they put that E in front of it, right? When it was stacks of binders around the building and you had the interdepartmental envelopes that went out and got ignored until 10 minutes before the inspector showed up. EQMS was an evolution for us in quality and in the industry in general. It was an evolution. It gave us a lot of rich data, but it made us information poor. You could get whatever you wanted. I mean, John and I sat in a meeting in England designing a deviation workflow. QA was so upset that we were not going to record by the minute, 60-minute increment, when a deviation occurred. And I said, wait a minute, you're telling me at some point you're going to come to me and ask me to write a report. This is how many times a deviation occurred at 2:07 in the morning. When I left the company 5 years later, I had not written that report yet.
I do remember that.
But you get to this point where you have all this information, you have all this data, and you're information rich or data rich and information poor. It's how do you pull that information and actually use it is really the key. You can slice and dice data however you want to, but how are you using it and how are you using it to make decisions? Is it risk-based? Is it safety-based? That sort of thing. So again, now we're adding AI into this. And for me, this is just the next evolution of this EQMS thing that we've been on a journey for better part of 25 years.
Yeah.
Now it's making that manageable, usable, and how are we going to define data from that?
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Moving on to quality. Zooming into quality, I suppose. John, I have a question for you. Where do you or how do you think the role of a quality leader has changed since, let's start with the early 2000s, I suppose, or late 2000s versus, and I feel there's probably been a transition in the role of a quality leader since COVID as well. But just generally speaking, if we were to go back sort of the last 20 years, how do you see the role of quality changed?
I've thought about this, oddly enough, in the last couple of weeks. And one thing, and I'm curious to see what both you and Ed think about this, if I'm off base or not. It seems to me that because I think of sort of the pharma world as being 80% small companies, startups, early phase companies, and 20% big pharmas. And mainly because I only operate in the former space of small startups in general, I find that in the past, 20 years ago, we would have large departments trying to create the best possible quality program that was perfect. And it was overly done. I think we wanted to be the best, and we would expend resources, but we didn't actually make the product any safer, and we didn't necessarily get the product to the clinic or through the clinic any faster, or regulatory approval any faster. And that what I've seen in the last 5 to 10 years, I think, is that smaller oftentimes is better in the sense of quality, not only function and department, say, size, but in the way the way people look at what they're doing with their quality resources. And instead of spending time and money doing things that add little value, people are asking the question, what does QA, let's take release. Ed was talking about drug product or drug substance release. There are only a few things in the release process that really are potentially harmful to a patient. Most of it is pretty simple paperwork check to make sure the batch records were all initial dated, signed, calculations were done correctly, that the C of A raw data matches. And that can be done a lot more effectively than it could be in the past, where you would use huge groups of people to do that kind of work. And it just seems to me in the last 5 to 10 years that people have found that they can get the quality work done that they need with more thoughtful analysis of what the problem is as it relates to patient safety. I think of 3 things: patient safety, clinical integrity of the study and integrity of the data, regulatory approval. And QA probably has more impact on regulatory approval than it does on any of the other 2. But that's just sort of my take on it. Ed, you may just throw me under the bus and say you're full of shit, but
what I'll say is for the other 2, though, John, this is where quality, we used to be the Department of No, the quality police. And the reality is as quality professionals, we are an integrated member of the team, and we're there to teach as much as we are there to protect the subject, protect the patient, to be the voice of the agencies inside the 4 walls of organization. When you look at the preamble to pharma GMPs, that was a concept behind the idea of the quality control unit, was to be the eyes and the ears and a partner inside the 4 walls of our organization. When you look at GMP in of itself, say what you do what you say, record what you did, check the results, act on the difference. The number one check on the results we used to use in QA all the time was the deviation. And something I always tell people is all things are possible with change control. There's other tools. There's change control, there's risk assessment, there's other tools beyond just the deviation that helps define that. Quality professionals need to be there coaching that along as well. So to your point, we have a strong input on that regulatory side and the partnership with our other colleagues as to what's working, what's not working, what we're seeing coming out of the agencies and learning from them. But most importantly, it's what we do inside the 4 walls of our own companies, where we are that voice of reason. I recently got some great feedback from somebody who said, the thing I like most is you explain why the regulation is written that crazy way and then how we can comply with it.
Yeah.
And that's an easy balance to play.
Yeah, I think Sorry, John, I was just going to say I agree. I think I started recruiting into quality in 2007, largely UK, but from my experience, I think just like you said, Ed, the Office of Product Prevention or the Quality Police sort of stigma, whatever you want to call it, I think it's a dated way of looking at quality. I don't think the majority of the industry sees that anymore. I'm sure there are still pockets of that. Well, there definitely are pockets of it, but I think broadly speaking, there are better leaders at the top of quality. There are better people that have developed good soft skills, communication skills that can talk with their partners across the business, which has probably helped negate that sort of stigma of the quality police over time.
Agreed. Completely agree with that.
There is something to be said for age, right, Ed? I know
Absolutely.
We don't compare, but
no, it's there's something to be said for living the. As I always tell people, the great thing about working in quality, and as you build your quality network, we all have the same scars. I mean, experiences. So we do learn well from each other. You are.
One of this topic around it kind of leads into how do you articulate quality? Are quality leaders getting better at articulating quality to boards, to executive leadership teams? It's a conversation that comes up in the podcast a fair bit. Do you think, in this, like in 2026, I guess, how does a quality leader go about providing value or articulating the value that they provide as a function? Are there easier ways to do that now?
I'll take a shot at that. Sort of mirroring on what I was saying earlier about sort of the three elements that I think are critical, which is, what is my job? It's to prevent a patient from getting hurt by something that we do. That's paramount. That's what the agency is charged with as well. And how do I achieve that is through judicious use of the resources that I have and the information that I have. But what it isn't is trying to throw up sort of perfect documentation systems to perfect that. The patient safety is everything that we work towards. And so much of how you write up a deviation or a change control, or you deal with a lot release, just has very little impact on the actual safety of the patient. I mean, what impacts the patient safety? It's the drug itself, and the making of the drug is where you can potentially hurt someone. So, and there's so many systems built into the production and testing that much of what we're doing is just making sure that framework is put in place properly at the beginning. And then it becomes a relatively simple task of saying, okay, we built a manufacturing process to make a good, high quality product that is safe. Then the quality aspect becomes relatively simple of checking to make sure that we did what we said we were going to do. And that doesn't have to be onerous. So from a board level perspective, I think I would want a quality person or team that is focused on the key priorities of sort of, for me, they're the ones I mentioned before: patient safety, clinical integrity, and getting us through the FDA approval of post getting an IND put out or regulatory filing put out, and then ultimately approval of the manufacturing site. So to me, it's a matter of just trying to do the least amount of quality intervention that still ticks those three key boxes without going overboard and wasting company resources. Because if we waste them, then we can't get the drug to the market in the first place. We've killed it and killed off all of the jobs because we were going over the top.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, compliance is easy. The regulations tell you where your procedures need to be. The regulations tell you what you're going to do, the how's up to you. And keeping it short, discreet, and compliant is really a key there. Something I always tell people, there's always a path to compliance. Sometimes we got to sit down and talk it through. Other times it's really a no-brainer.
Yeah. Ed, just on, I suppose, the leadership side of quality, and I speak to quality guys all the time, as you know, and everyone seems stressed and burnt out a lot of the time. Working long hours, small teams, lean teams. Do you see that? Do you feel like quality leaders there's being too much asked of them, or do you think that just comes with the territory?
It comes with the territory in some cases. Other cases, yes, there are organizations which put a lot on quality. There are also quality professionals that take on a lot of things that are outside of their sphere of influence because they feel it makes them more important. And sometimes we have to put the ego aside and say, does this really belong with the compliance unit? Again, go back to the preamble. The role of the quality unit is very well defined in the preambles to 211. A little bit more cryptically in the preamble to 820 and, all the other areas in between. But when you really think, and this is to what John was saying, when you think about what is the role of the quality unit and what are we here to do, then you can kind of say, does that really belong in quality or does that belong over here?
Yeah. Yeah. John, you've obviously worked a fair bit in the startup space. Are you seeing similar sort of things? Do you agree with that? It's about really defining what compliance's role is.
Yeah. When I talk to executive teams or sort of C-level people, they seem to be particularly appreciative of a practical approach and looking at quality from that perspective, as opposed to saying, okay, I need 50 SOPs within 2 months and, a QMS that's fully featured with audits and deviations, kappas, risk assessment, everything built in. You can get by with pretty simple procedures and very few of them for quite some time until you're close to pivotal phase 3 or commercial operation. And that can save a company a lot of time and money.
Yeah. Guys, I'm conscious of time. And I've enjoyed this conversation a lot. We could probably carry on for another hour or so. But I thought
the three of us in a conversation together is not going to end well because it just doesn't.
With a bottle of wine last time. Well, I thought I'd end the conversation with some light-hearted, a bit of fun, sort of quick-fire, instinctive answers. I'm going to throw out some sort of very big picture statements, and I would like you both to respond with either optimistic, cautious, or concerned. Okay, so just one word: optimistic, cautious, or concerned. Right. So I'll read the statement out, and then I'll come to each of you, and you can give me your verdict, and I'll take turns. So number one: the state of biotech funding in 2026. Optimistic, cautious, or concerned?
Cautious.
John, cautious. Okay. Next statement: burnout at VP or C-suite level. John, optimistic, cautious, or concerned?
Optimistic.
Optimistic.
Yep. As well. Optimistic.
Very good. Number 3, the role of a quality leader in executive decision making in 2026. Optimistic, cautious, or concerned?
Optimistic.
Yeah. I was just thinking through some scenarios. Yeah, optimistic. Yeah. I see a lot more involvement.
Very good. Fourth one, the next generation of quality leaders coming through.
Ooh.
John, optimistic, cautious, or concerned?
I'm going to say concerned.
Okay.
Concerned.
Okay.
When I talk to some younger folks in quality, yeah.
And I think a lot of people are aging out because they're done.
Yeah. Final one then. Long-term optimism for biotech beyond 2026. Optimistic, cautious, or concerned?
Optimistic.
Always will be.
Yep. That's why we keep doing this, John.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. Yeah, you got to be optimistic, I guess, in this game. Good fun. Last bit then to close out things then. So a couple of closing predictions. And I will start with you. But by the end of 2026, what do you think the best quality teams, the best quality leaders will be doing differently from everyone else?
We will have started integrating AI more into our day-to-day responsibilities.
John, how about you? Do you think the best quality leaders, quality teams will be doing differently?
I'd like to tie it back to the question you just asked before this. I'd like to think optimistically that more quality leaders will be working with the executive leadership teams to make decisions. The best example I can get is, and I'm sure Ed will agree, unless he's really lucky, that I would be really happy to see teams that involve quality before they select their CDMOs. And we always go in and we audit, and we always go in and we get quality agreements. But once you've already selected it, it's hard to sort of deal with the repercussions of a decision that might have been made that did not include quality in its process.
Tale as old as time, Sean. Tale as old as time.
John, Ed, that's been fantastic. Thank you so much for both of you for your time. You're both very busy men, so I really appreciate you. I emailed you or I messaged you, and within minutes you both were like, "Let's do this." So thank you. Thanks for your time and sharing all of those insights. I think it'll be an interesting year ahead of us, and I'm wishing you both the best of luck. Dinner's on me when I'm next in Boston.
Perfect.
Sounds like a plan, gentlemen.
Great.
Cheers, guys.
All right.
Great to see both of you. Take care.
Cheers, guys. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you for listening to today's show. I hope that you got value from it, whether you're starting your career in quality or if you're at the top of your field. Today's episode was brought to you by RX Group. I'm the founder of RX Group. We are a pharma and biotech recruitment organization focusing purely on quality assurance. We recruit consultants and senior level permanent quality professionals into the pharma and biotech industry. If we can support you, whether that be in a hiring capacity or if you yourself are looking for work, please get in touch with me on LinkedIn, visit our LinkedIn page where you can subscribe to the podcast, and visit our website, www.rx-group.io, to find out more about us. See you soon.